What's up guys, it's me, Roku, back with some more League content, and in this video I have a top lane solo queue tier list for patch 12.14. Before I get into dragging these champions into the tier list, I want to take a minute to talk about the different features of this tier list that sets it apart from what you would usually see elsewhere, okay? If you don't care about that, just click on the timestamp for any one of these guys and, see where your favorite champion ends up, but for now, let's just get right into what this tier list is all about. So first off, strength in League, in terms of solo queue, isn't about like some sort of arbitrary metric of like how much they can carry or how much damage they do, but how often they're powerful, okay? So the overpowered champions are usually useful or just really strong in basically every single solo queue situation you can think of, whereas the lower you go on the list, you get champions that are powerful in specific scenarios, okay? That's why I have these kinds of descriptors for the lower tiers, whereas in C tier, you have champions that are only good as counter picks, where you counter them into the right teams, right champions, they pop off, then they're really powerful, but if you don't counter, then they run into issues and they get very easily exploited, especially by the higher tier champions. So think of it like this, right? Like a spectrum. These guys right here are almost always useful, whereas the lower you go, the more niche and just specific their purpose becomes, right? They're powerful in less situations. Another thing I want to mention is these difficulty borders. Now, the difficulty borders go from easiest to hardest, with green being the easiest, then light yellow, then dark yellow being medium, then orange being medium to difficult, and red being just quite difficult to master, right? Now, these difficulty borders aren't the maximum skill ceiling of the champion. That's one thing you gotta be aware of, right? These are the minimum you have to know about the champion to really play well with them in solo queue, right? Let's say Camille. If you aren't really good with Camille in terms of laning, you aren't good with the matchups, you won't be able to do anything with her. So there's that requirement of skill you need with her to get her and play her to the point where she's at the tier that I put her, okay? Like Darius, for example, right? You gotta know his combos, his matchups, when you can get kills, etc. Or Garen, it's like he's not even that difficult. You don't need to have much, skill with him beforehand. You can just pick him up 5-10 matches and you're good to go in terms of playing him in solo queue. And I think that is all. Let's just get right into putting these guys up here. I'm going to justify all of my choices, starting with Aatrox. Aatrox is in a really, really nice spot right now because they actually just super nerfed anti-heal recently, which meant that Aatrox can't actually be really quickly countered by Executioner's Calling as easily. Aatrox is actually loving the patch. He's doing amazingly. So yeah, and he's getting picked a lot more often. And yeah, he's a very, very solid pick for this patch. Akali. I'd say Akali is a mostly strong champion, and her only drawback is her weak early game. Akali can't put up that much of a fight against a lot of top laners pre-6, and in some of the higher elo games, this can be an absolute detriment, because if anything happens on the top side of the map, while Akali might get there sooner because of her mobility, she's not going to get that much done, right? Almost every single one of the higher tier champions, or even some of the lower tier champions with really sick earlies, can get prio of the lane and roam and just win that skirmish before Akali can do anything about it, okay? Akali also loses most all-ins pre-6. She just really is dependent on her level 6 power spike. Her level 6 power spike is one of the strongest in the game, but it's just getting to that point is the difficulty with the champion, and that's why she is not always powerful, because sometimes the game just gets messed up before you can even get to the point where everybody has their ultimates up. Akshan. I'd say Akshan is a pretty powerful champion. The thing about Akshan is that you really have to abuse the fact that he can just roam around and get things done all over the map. He doesn't play the game like normal top laners, where you try to grind out a lead using top lane, and then once you get that lead secure, then you use it to snowball the rest of the map. Akshan's a bit different. Instead of just trying to get kills off of one guy, you just want to make sure that your opposing top laner does not have prio, right? And the second you have prio, you look at the map, you run to the nearest fight, and you try to win it, okay? You go for ganks, you go for invades, you defend your jungler when they're getting invaded, all these kinds of fights. You got to be everywhere as Akshan. And if you get like a double kill or a triple kill because of your grappling hook resets, it lets you basically go from kill to kill to kill, even if they're really far apart. Then you can come back to lane with like a multi-kill lead and just, be in a position where you can solo your opponent even though you roamed. Now, the main issue with Akshan's gameplay is that you just have to balance not getting your top lane destroyed, but that's all about the Akshan player's macro and how good they are at moving around the map. Camille. Camille is a great champion. If you know how to play her in her early lane and get to her Sheen power spike, then she's an absolute menace. The thing about Camille is that, like, although she does have a lot of horrible matchups, she's very rarely in a position where it's just unplayable for her, if you know what I mean. It's just like she can't do anything, just go AFK. You can't really do this to a Camille, especially when she's running some of her more, like, the runes that help her in lanes, like going for a grasp, inspiration, going for like refill pots, going for like crop potions, cookies, whatever. These kinds of things are great at keeping her in the lane. Now, those were nerfed, so I guess that playstyle is getting a bit weaker, but Camille is still a great champion if you have enough skill to get her to a point where she can basically get her Sheen item, because that is her real power spike. Without a Sheen item, like Triforce or Divine, Camille is nothing, so you really need it to get anything done with this champion. Also, I am hating this heat wave. Jesus Christ. Up next, Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is a great counterpick champion because, like, if you pick her into a character where you can get a lot of work done with your miasma, the grounding thing, you can basically just perma chain land your Qs because they're immobile and just ground them to dust with your ease, then she's an excellent champion. If you pick her into a non-counterpick matchup, she can get destroyed. Camille is also very, very big jungler food because she can't actually peel herself. And once people get on top of her, it's just game over because, like, her grounding thing is so small when she casts it closer to herself. So, like, again, once people get on top of her, it's game over. So the amount of, like, macro and stuff you need to play Cassie is actually quite high. Not to mention the mechanics, because there's a lot of just small micro movements that you really gotta master to play this champion. Cho'Gath. I'd say Cho'Gath is a mostly strong champion. He really is just dependent on him landing his skill shots, namely his Rupture. That's one of the most that's his most useful ability in the entire game, because not only does it stun the target, but it also slows them. So it's like an instant disengage or an instant engage depending on what he wants to do with that specific trade or all-in or whatever, right? Cho'Gath also has a silence, and in my opinion, silences are heavily underrated in the current meta, where you're fighting against your Kianas, your Katarinas, your Fioras, your Rivens, where they just are super, super jumpy, they go all over the place, and, like, if one of these champions goes in on your team on a team fight, a Cho'Gath silence will just take them out instantly. Not only will they not be able to dash, which makes them easier to, like, just lock down on CC, but most of the champions like these are very, very ability reliant to even do damage, so you're really neutering champions and getting a lot of work done with Cho'Gath, and you can do it at quite a decent range. So yeah, as a nice defensive champion or a good bush cheesing catch champion, Cho'Gath does a very good job. The only issue he has is just trying to survive laning, but if you play him, like, defensively, you play him good enough, then that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Darius. Darius is one of the strongest top laners in the game right now. Now, the changes to Darius in terms of the buffs and the durability update helping him, it meant that he was more powerful in all the situations that he was really powerful in, but he's still weak or near useless in the situation he just used to be weak in. He's just overpowered in the overpowered tier because if you pick him into a situation where he's good in, you get a lead, and just stop yourself from dying in stupid ways, you can very, very easily just carry fights non-stop, just dunk people one after another, right? So Darius is absolutely loving this patch. He's S tier, not much needs to be said about that. Mundo. Mundo is a lane holder. It's still using the old Mundo icon, but Mundo is great for just existing in lane and not doing that much, right? The thing about Mundo is that no matter what happens to him, right, the ganks, people like being aggressive with him, he has every tool he needs to survive in lane. Killing a Mundo is not that easy, especially when he gets to level 6 and he has a bunch of health under his belt. He just heals so much. The main issue with Mundo is that he's not the kind of champion you want to get fed on 1v9 games with, because he just can't. He's melee, which makes, you know, running up to some of the backliners really tough. Not to mention how, like, he doesn't really snowball that hard either, right? It's like he just does one thing, which is throwing his hatchets, chasing quite well, running up in teamfights, and moving along with people who've engaged and done the work. So let's say you're Diana goes and ults everyone, then you run in and get some work done. But on his own, he doesn't really contribute that much, right? So Mundo is the perfect weak side champion, or one of the most perfect weak side champions, because, like, if you just play it carefully and play it like a normal human being, you can get out of lane, always useful, even if you get camped to the maximum. So let's say you're playing a Clash or something, or you know that your bot lane has to win and you're going to get neglected by your jungler, then Mundo might not be the worst option. This is the tier for champions like that who just are good at holding lane and then scaling into something that's useful. Fiora is very, very, very powerful. She is just insanely strong, right? Just like, well, the thing I wanted to touch on when I was talking about Fiora is her difficulty border. I know that this would raise some eyebrows, but I had to explain this, okay? So, if you guys remember, in Season 11, when Camille was really, really overpowered, she got to a point where it was no longer difficult to play Camille, right? Camille is historically been a champion where she's not like, you know, your one-trick Riven difficult to play, but she still has a lot of difficulties in getting out of her early laning, right? She has some difficulty that you have to master to play this champion well. But in Season 11, Camille got so overpowered that any schmuck could just pick her up and perform insanely well and get free LP because she was just that overpowered, especially with her an Ignite, Teleport, Grasp, Inspiration setup. Like, with this setup, you could be absolutely just, you have no idea what's going on and still do well with Camille as like a high elo person, right? Let's say you're a master tier top laner, you've never played Camille in your life, you can very easily abuse her, right? Because of how overpowered she got, it no longer took any difficulty to play her. Fiora is slowly approaching this position, where all the people who play Fiora in higher ranks aren't like Fiora one-tricks. They aren't like heavy Fiora mains. Fiora is like, because of just how, like, you know, how her strengths are, like her riposte and stuff, it's like, you don't need that much skill, right, to achieve what you would need with Fiora to really get to her strong point, right? So, basically speaking, she's like, her maximum, we see these videos of these Chinese Fioras where they pull off these sick combos. Like, Fiora, at her core, is a very difficult champion to play. But right now, to play her to the point where she's an S tier champion, you don't actually have to be that good at Fiora. You just have to pick her up, know her basics, and that is pretty much it, honestly, right? Obviously, more knowledge is going to help you win out in some of the more tougher matchups, but it's really not required. So yeah, I had to touch on that before some motherfucker in the comments raged at me. Gangplank. I'd say Gangplank is in a pretty solid spot. They actually changed him around quite a bit, where they took out some of his early game, they took out some early game stats from him. They made his barrels slow less, but now he scales with crit a bit more, whereas passive scales with crit more, and he's just, you know, once he gets S's Reaver, it's just going to be an even bigger power spike for him. In my opinion, this really hasn't changed his position all that much. Gangplank is a lane holder, but it just holds lane really, really well. He can just zone people off of the wave so effectively with his barrels that a perfectly played Gangplank, just you can't get on top of this guy, right? He's just gonna zone you so well that if you even think about going for him, he's gonna barrel you, slow you, run back, recharge his barrels, and then do it again, right? But most of the time, what Gangplanks do, they put their barrel down, their barrel's already recharged, so if you try to walk up to do anything, they put a barrel down, they hit you with it, and they have two more in the tank to just put down on another one, and then they'll zone you again, right? So it's like really not easy to get into Gangplank's Fury Rifles and get on top of them. Them taking his early game power has made it so that if you can catch him and force a fight really early on before his backs, then you can kill him and snowball against him. They've opened up this window slightly, but what they've also done is that once he does get back and get his first crit items, then he's an absolute menace. So, I'd say that Gangplank is still a pretty strong champion, but he's just quite difficult to play, considering how you have to kite perfectly. You have to be very aware of what champions can do with their abilities so that you can actually use your barrels at the right time, these kinds of things. Garen. Now, Garen, I'd say, I'm putting him in A tier, but just be mindful of the fact that I'm only doing this because he's so good in low elo, right? This tier list is kind of supposed to be like a balance between low and high elo, where I'm weighing high elo a lot more than low elo, but I'm still weighing low elo into this tier list. And Garen, if we're taking high elo mostly, he's a B tier champion, but his low elo effectiveness cannot be denied. Garen takes no mechanical skill or anything to play. He's very, very easy, so you can just pick him up and use him whenever you need to. And the thing with Garen is that ever since they actually reworked his E, he's just been a solid damage option if you do pick your fights carefully. And once you do get him to a point where his passive kicks in, you can go for absolutely crazy plays, lose most of your HP, crazy trades, and then still walk out having won that trade because you're just healed to full anyway. So I'd say Garen is a pretty strong champion to just pick up. He does get a bit limited to play when you're playing against people who know what they're doing, right? Like, if you're playing as a competent person, they'll know exactly what Garen is capable of, and you won't be able to outplay them, right? So if you're in a bad matchup, there's no way of let's say you're playing Darius, right? Even if you're in a bad matchup, if you're patient enough, you can eventually win it. This is not that much of a possibility with Garen. With Garen, what you see is what you get. So, I would say that he's a good champion to have in your back pocket, but as a main or a one-trick, I wouldn't really recommend it because there's nothing to main or to one-trick. He just does the same thing no matter what. Gnar. Honestly, Gnar has been creeping. I mean, I've been sleeping on Gnar. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I thought Gnar was kind of useless, but more and more people are picking him up because of just how consistent he is in what he offers to the team. And also, ever since the durability patch, mini Gnar is not that easy to put down, actually. Because the thing with Gnar was that if you caught him when he was in his mini form, you could very easily just one-shot him like that, but that just has become a bit more difficult to do. But with some nerfs, I guess they've put some of those stats down, so I'm going to put him in B tier, right? This is one pick that I'm not 100% sure on, because a lot of people play Gnar, right? A lot of people play, I mean, I beat them all, but a lot of people play Gnar, so, like, you know, maybe, like, there's something that's there that I'm not seeing, but from what I gather, it's just because of the durability changes and because of how consistent he is, and also he's not even that difficult to play, let's be real. Like, all of his abilities are just so massive, you just gotta do them at the right time, and know some of the mechanics, like, you can get a double jump off and then transform into your mega form. Something like that, I guess. I think the nerfs will put him back down into B tier, but this is still higher than where I used to put him, which is like lane holder right here. So yeah, there he is. Gragas. Gragas is a very strong champion because Gragas is one of the best laners in the entire game. His trading is absolutely phenomenal, right? His barrel throwing thing is like absolutely undodgeable, right? You cannot dodge it. It's like such a massive ability that, like, unless he only hits you with just one side of it, like, you're just not going to get out of it, right? You have to sacrifice a dash to do it. And also, Gragas, once he gets tier and starts to stack it up, he's not going to have mana issues. His passive is going to heal him from trades, and he can choose to just, the second you get on top of him, his belly slam is just going to act as the perfect disengage because it is instant CC. Instant. It's very difficult to react to, impossible to react to. You just have to basically predict that he's going to do that, right? So a champion like Fiora, where, she has a riposte against her belly slam, so you'd think that she counters Gragas, but no, because when Gragas is right next to you, it's instant, right? It happens like in a blink of an eye. And what Gragas can do is throw a barrel, do that thing, and then belly slam, and once he gets phase rush, he just runs out of there instantly, and you can't actually keep up with him, even with slows, because, you know, phase rush, right? So, yeah. Gragas is such a phenomenal laner, and he has got a lot of great matchups into a lot of the higher tier champions, actually. So, another thing with Gragas is that he is great on weak side, right? He's not easy to put down, actually, because with his ult, he can peel himself even extra hard. He's got phase rush if he's taking it, and I guess if he's going for more of a tanky build, he's just going to be so tanky that it's impossible to kill him. Like, there's a lot you can do with Gangplank with builds and Gragas with runes and builds, and he's also great on weak side. He's got a lot of great matchups, so honestly, Gragas is one of the sleeper picks of these last few patches. He's a great champion, in my opinion, just to play top lane. And, like, if you need a character to play on weak side, Gragas is a great option. Graves is honestly just a lane holder. His range isn't high enough to, you know, save him from some of the more jumpy characters, or even like a characters that take ghost or have move speed. You know, like a set running towards him or like a Volibear or something. He can't really get away from these guys that easily. Playing Graves in top lane takes a lot of like understanding how your smokescreen interacts with very specific abilities, right? If you don't know that and you just play him to just farm and scale up, then you're gonna be like in a nightmare situation because Graves just like once you put Graves down, he can't actually farm up that safely because even though he is ranged, his range is not that high. So, yeah. But if you go for like a build like you go for fleet footwork, you play super safe, and you play just to scale up, then you can scale into a monster with Graves once you get like 1-2 items where you're just a sort of like solid DPS for your team. So if you need like I don't know a solid source of if you want to be like a ADC type DPS who's a bit meaty, but you want to also survive laning, then Graves is an okay option, but I just wouldn't recommend him all that much. Gwen. I'd say Gwen is quite a... I'll put him as her strong. I usually put Gwen in higher tiers than she should be, but looking at everything, she's kind of A tier. Now, what they did do with the update, where they did change a lot of things for Gwen, where they reduced her true damage, they increased the normal damage with her Q, they reduced the duration of her W, but also increased the amount of stats she gets, they buffed her E in a lot of ways, but then they nerfed her ultimate by making it so that to recast the ult, you have to wait 1 second. Now, this might not sound that crazy, but Gwen's whole thing is she gets you in a position where you're far enough away from your turret where you can't actually get away from her, and then she goes in all in, spams her aura on you, and just kills you before you can blink. What that change has basically done is it basically has given Gwen counterplay, where if she starts her ultimate, they actually have some time to outmaneuver and get away, right? Because she can't just dump it all down at once. So with that much, not that much, with that being in there, Gwen is, I guess, easier to fight against. But on the other hand, she's also easier to play, because Gwen's gameplay beforehand was all about landing that center Q, right? You land that true damage in your Q, you get so much damage off, it's insane, but it's not really necessary nowadays. You can just, you know, miss with the side of your Q, and it's a bit less punishing. So Gwen's easier to play, but she's also a bit easier to play against, so I'd say that, I'll put her in a strong A tier. She's a solid champion. She scales up to a point where she can just completely 1v9. Her W lets her be a team fighting monster. So yeah, she's a good champion to pick up if you need a scaler or something. Or if we just like anime girls, you weeb. Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger is a solid counterpick champion. He just locks the lane down. Now, there are some characters that absolutely destroy her. Characters that are good against immortal champions like, you know, I guess Yasuo kind of works well against them. Like Fiora can do well against them too. Cho'Gath, I guess, if he lands a Rupture, can get a lot of work done. And Heimerdinger can't stun him or whatever because he'll just be silenced. So, and also Cho'Gath actually gets a lot of sustain too in this lane, which is helpful. Like, there are some champions in top lane that absolutely destroy him, right? And the thing with Heimerdinger is that he has to have his items so he can get some work done. He also has to fight champions who don't really move around a lot, where it's like, if a fight's happening in this area, it's gotta stay in this area, right? Like, he's gotta get caught, essentially, and then Zhonya and hope that the champions are, like, still staying around to get hit by his, big turret, I guess. Like, the ult turret, I guess, right? I don't know what it's called. It's like, if you can pick him into the right team, into the right matchup, where you don't have to, like, Jesus, bugs, where, you know, you can actually get a lot of work done against immobile champions, then he'll be actually quite 1v9. But if you don't, then you are going to run into some issues. Illaoi. I'd say Illaoi is a pretty niche champion. She can't get that much done. Let's be real. Illaoi has just not been loving the current season because everyone's jumping out all over the place. The things I talked about with Heimer, where the fight has to remain in this one specific spot, kind of apply. But it's even worse for Illaoi because she doesn't even have range to work with. And a lot of times where she does get that perfect ultimate off, she just gets killed and one shot. So I don't know. Illaoi, she kind of liked the durability changes a bit, but it was not enough to put her into a point where she'll really contend with some of the higher tier champions. Irelia. I'd say Irelia, no matter what, is going to be a really strong champion, right? Like, Like, she's just dominant in lane by just existing, right? She's got sustain. Like, the only thing you gotta know about Irelia is landing your abilities and also wave control. Wave control is such an underrated skill on the champion, but once you got that lockdown, you can get so much work done. It is crazy. Irelia has early game prio by just default. If her jungler comes in for a 2v2, she can just absolutely destroy everybody. She's a constant source of damage. She's not like a bursty champion, so as long as she's in the fight, she's contributing to it. And she also scales up to be an absolute monster. Like, she's a great champion to play in top lane, honestly. You just gotta make sure to understand that, like, sometimes you can't just put all your abilities on one champion and kill them. There are some champions that do well against Irelia, so, like, you gotta be careful in some situations, is all I'm saying. Yeah, Jax. Jax is absolutely powerful. He's loving that the fights are a bit longer, because then he can actually get his passive off. Him plus lethal tempo is absolutely broken. He can actually build Frozen Heart's second item. Frozen Heart's 2.5k. Like, it's such an overpowered, like, combination. Divine Sunder and Frozen Heart, he is so unkillable, but he can still just one-shot people straight up. So, like, against an auto-attack reliant team, Jax is an absolute menace, right? Just an absolute monster that just cannot be dealt with. So, like, he's one of the champions that I heavily recommend you pick up if you are thinking about it. He's just so powerful. And a lot of these characters he does quite well against. Jayce. I think that Jayce is pretty strong right now. Like, he used to be a bit stronger. He used to be, like, some people would argue he's S tier. I'd say he's A tier, but A plus tier powerful. But I'm going to put him in A tier for now. Like, if you master Jayce and you know how to play matchups, how to not get caught and killed by doing stupid things, then Jayce is an absolute menace, because he is like a mage in the form of an AD character, right? He's got such a massive range that he can just, like, get a lot of damage done before the fight even begins. His poke is absolutely insane, especially in Baron fights or Dragon fights where you really need that poke to just give you any bit of advantage you need. Honestly, if you just understand how to play Jayce to the point where you come out of lane no matter what, you should be good to go. Just pick him into the right matchups and start beating people up. Karma. Karma is basically a lane holder. She's just there to exist and annoy you, right? If you get annoyed, she's winning, because the best Karma's going to do is just tilt her opposing top laner. The only good thing about Karma is that she's very not reliant on gold. She's reliant on very low amounts of gold, which basically means that you don't actually have to farm that well as her. She's not a very high economy champion, so she doesn't need to get that fed to actually do a lot. She's great as a weak side champion because of this, and she can also support her team quite well. So in certain team compositions where you really are playing against, like, playing around 1 to 2 carries, then Karma can get a lot of work done. Kayle. I'd say Kayle is mostly strong. Kayle's whole issue is that her early game is weak, and that sometimes, like, although her level 16 and her power spikes are really powerful, your team won't always hold the game until then. Sometimes your team will just int it, sometimes your team needs a strong BV top laner to help them with fights, and if you can't do that for your team, then it might just be over before the game begins. So you really have to pick Kayle into games where her ultimate is actually useful on its own, where, let's say that you have a Darius on the enemy team, right? And you use your ultimate to cancel his reset so you can't get a lot of work done. These are kind of situations where your ultimate itself is so useful to your team that you can afford to be useless until you get your items and your levels, right? In these kinds of games, Kayle is really strong. But again, right, her early game being as weak as it is just kind of makes it so that compared to some of the higher tier champions, she's just not that powerful. Kennen. Kennen is a very nice counter pick champion. If you pick him into the right characters, that lets him scale into his mid game where he can just run into a team, ult stun everyone, one-shot the ADCs and the Zhonya's to be invulnerable while he's stunning everybody, then you're going to get a lot of work done. Kennen scales really well into team fights, but his main issue is that, one, his early game is not that strong despite him being ranged. Like, he doesn't do that much damage, actually. He just kind of, like, pesters people, right? Like, his advantage is that he can kind of escape quite easily from 1v1 situations where he just gets a stun on you and then lightning rushes away. But the big issue here is that if a jungler or someone gets on top of him, he might run into a situation where he does not have the time to actually get his 3 stacks off, right? Kennen's stun isn't instant. He has to get his skill shot shuriken in, he has to get his shuriken auto attack in, the empowered auto attack, and he has to either go through them with his lightning rush or do that I don't know which ability it is, but do that thing where he just activates it and it like zaps people, right? That's not instant. That takes some time, and sometimes it's just not enough. Like, and once people get on top of Kennen, because he doesn't have like a dash or anything, you very easily can get into a situation where you get one CC, another CC, even if you have phase rush, it might just be too late and you'll get killed. So Kennen is definitely jungler food for sure. But if you do pick him into some of the matches where he can't really be punished, then I guess you can get a lot of work done with him once you do get out of the lane and you can contribute to team fights. Kled. Kled is such a monster nowadays. The durability patch has made him insanely difficult to play against. But the thing with Kled is that all he does is win lane, if that makes sense, right? Kled is almost always going to have, like, a big CS lead against his laning opponents. Like, there are very few champions who are going to have higher CS than Kled, or even who are going to survive early levels with Kled, because Kled is near immortal in the first few levels. He just has so much HP to work with that killing Kled is like, it's like nightmare difficulty. You know, the earlier the fight is, the more reliant it is on auto attacks and just these kinds of, you know, hits. And because of this, Kled's, him having high HP just helps him out a lot. Now, the good thing about fighting against Kled is that once you get out of your once you get into your first back, your second back, and you get your items, you start scaling up, then Kled is in trouble. Kled's level 6 is not that great of a combat ability. Like, all it is it's like an engage, and that's it, right? It's just an engage. It does some damage. It kind of CCs someone, but, like, just compare that to other level 6 ultimates. Fiora, her ultimate, it heals her, but just 2 damage. Jax, he becomes nigh invulnerable with his resistances. Darius, the dunk. It's like, his ultimate just pales in comparison to the other champions. So if we're talking a level 6 fight, then Kled is going to be in a disadvantageous position. And, you know, the later on the game we go, the more in trouble Kled is because he does not scale up that well. So Kled's job is to get a lead before level 6 and just get kills as much as he can. But if he cannot do this, then Kled is not going to have a good time. And the thing about this, his positioning right here, is that a lot of the higher tier champions can put up pretty decent fights against Kled, or they can actually survive long enough to the point where, like, you know, they're no longer in a position where Kled can actually just beat them, right? So, like, and Kled also gets outscaled quite heavily, so he's a great champion, especially in low elo, where if you can get kills, you can very easily 1v9 the game, but if you can't, if your opponent does just straight up int, and they just wait patiently, then you're gonna be in trouble. Lillia. I'd say Lillia is super niche. People keep telling me that Lillia is this, like, oh, Lillia has a 0.1% pick rate, but she's got a 55% win rate. Like, that is a point, right? But I don't think Lillia is that, like, that commonly good, because the champions that beat Lillia are basically all of the higher tier champions, right? Champions that have, like, these short, fast dashes, champions with CC, champions with slows, which is basically everybody, right? Because, like, all these champions, almost all of them have slows, like instant slows, instant CCs, instant movement. Like, what beats Lillia is speed, right? And almost all these champions have that on their side. So the champions that Lillia beats are these slower, more bulky champions who can't get things done instantly, like Tahm Kench, I guess, your Ornns, these kinds of big, lumbering champions who really get countered super hard by move speed. In these cases, Lillia can get a lot of work done, but that's not the meta right now, right? Most of the meta champions are really fast. They have abilities that are, like, instant, right? And Lillia just cannot deal with these. So aside from a few champions, she can't really keep up with, like, a lot of the champions up here. And honestly, the funniest part is, all the champions that beat Lillia, like your Rivens, your Fioras and stuff, they don't just beat Lillia, they beat her and they 1v9, because those are the champions that also snowball insanely hard. So, the champions Lillia is weak against are the champions that are snowball characters who just kill her and just are an absolute menace to deal with, right? And I feel like half the reason why Lillia is so good in low elo is that in low elo people don't actually read the abilities of the champions, so they don't know what they're fighting. And also most of the low elo champions are characters that are slow and stuff, like Mordekaiser, etc. But yeah, Lillia sucks. Don't spam me with BS. Malphite. Malphite's a great counter pick. He can counter a lot of the more auto-attack reliant champions, and he's also great at just lane holding. He's kind of like a hybrid between here. He's going to be useful no matter what, and he has his like whole cheese roll thing that lets him interact with the lane at a range. So yeah, there's nothing really to say here. He's quite rock solid. Look, okay, Lucian. Lucian is not the best range champion right now because although he does have a dash, this dash doesn't really peel himself all that much. With Lucian, you want to basically dash away and make sure that the champion who's running at you to try to get on top of you is dead by the time they get on top of you. If they're not, you're gone, man. Because, like, again, his dash is just a dash away from the enemy. It's not a CC. It's not, hey, I'll push you back and then, dash back like a Quinn thing. It's just him dashing backwards, which makes it so that, like, he's basically the most difficult range top laner to play in top lane. So, yeah, just not really that well into some of the champions who can just get on top of him and just kill him and snowball off of him. Neeko sucks. Same kind of situation, except she has no way to peel herself off. She just has her stun and some move speed, which is never enough. Once that stun is gone, she's basically just a free kill. She's also insanely just jungler food, just so easy to kill. Really bad top lane. Maokai, don't even have to like mention this guy. Like Maokai is not played that often, and everybody can see why. Malphite sucks. He's just way too slow. Like, everything he does is so slow and so telegraphed, and all the champions that are meta absolutely destroy him because of just how good they are. Getting in his face and just killing him. So Maokai is horrible. Sorry, guy. But I retract my sorry, because sorry would imply that there are people who still play Maokai, which is no one plays it. Mordekaiser. I'd say Mordekaiser is A tier. This is another one of those champions where I'm weighing him up because of low elo, right? Normally I put him in B tier with Garen, but if we're talking about low elo and high elo, I'll put him in A tier. He's actually quite good in some situations, really. The best part about him is that he requires no skill to really play. You don't really need to be that good at him. The only skill with him is just landing your Q and not wasting your E over and over again. But once you get the basics down, it's just, quite easy to play him. His ultimate is a really powerful utility to just take someone out of a fight. It's just that a lot of the backliners in the game, like Zeri and stuff, beat him in his death room, which is why, if we're considering competent players, then he's B tier, but again, right, in low ranks, people don't know what they're doing. They'll just eat Mordekaiser's abilities, and he's going to be A tier. Nasus. I put Nasus in the niche right here. He's kind of a counter pick, but he doesn't counter all that much in that, like, if you pick him into a team where his attack speed and move speed, so the Wither, is really useful, then you can get a lot done with Nasus. But that's the only case I can think of where he's going to be a good pick. And also if he gets a good matchup, God forbid. Like, Nasus having good matchups, sheesh. It's like, it's just unheard of because Nasus' early game sucks so bad. It's just insane. He can't set up ganks for his jungler, right? Not that well because it's just the slow. And you slow Riven, she just dashes away and she's gone, right? He has no CC. He is jungler food because he's very immobile, right? He can't put up a fight early game. And if people just disengage once he has his ultimate, that's it. He needs his ultimate to be powerful. And sometimes people can just lock him down and kill him even in his ultimate. Because remember, Nasus can't actually reach a backline. He just moves. He doesn't have a dash or anything. He doesn't have move speed. I guess you could go Ghost, but then that's going to make early laning even harder. But like, again, like a support can just insta-CC you, keep you locked down long enough for that Vayne, that Zeri, that Kog'Maw to just shred you in seconds before you can even get in range to wither them, right? So Nasus is very niche. He's, again, a low elo pick. Really good on low elo. People don't know what they're doing, but, like, he's so bad against people who know what they're doing that I can't put him any higher just because of low elo like I did with Mordekaiser or Garen. Ornn is so low-key strong. Like, he's so sleeper powerful that it's just crazy. Ornn is one of the best laners in the game. His trading is insane. Him being able to buy items from the shop is actually sustain, right? The longer he is in lane, the more powerful he becomes. Like, let's say he loses some HP. Get Ruby Crystal. He loses some mana. He can get a Sapphire Crystal, even though they don't do that, but it's a possibility, right? Ornn has sustain. Ornn has great trading. Ornn gets a lot more stats from every single piece of stat he buys because, you know, he gets more resistances and gets more HP. It's just so many stuff just make Ornn really, really powerful. And this is all on top of the fact that Ornn actually does quite a bit of damage, right? Ornn is actually a threat where if you get caught by some sort of messed up combo where he can get like 2-3 of his like brutal all attacks off, then he's basically just one-shot you by himself. He's amazing in team fights where he can just set up like super messed up CCs because his ultimate is really low range. He's amazing at peeling his allies because, you know, he can just CC the people. He can brittle them so that any CC on them is even longer. Like, Ornn is an absolute menace, and on top of everything, he's really like difficult to kill on weak side. Like, he's just like, Ornn is one of the best solo queue champions in the game. Not just because of all these things, but because Ornn is not a champion who's ever going to get nerfed, right? Never. Ornn is a champion that Riot has completely forgotten about. They're never going to touch him, which basically means Ornn is going to be this strong for basically seasons, okay? So if you need a champion, like a tanky champion to put in your back pocket to basically pull out when you are in a weak side game or when you are in a matchup where your one-trick bruiser main just gets counterpicked by them, you just pull the Ornn out and just dominate the game by being a big, meaty tank. So yeah, Ornn is really good and a great pickup. Poppy's a counterpick, I guess. Like, she's really great into some of the more jumpier champions, right? That's her mechanic. But I would say you should not just counterpick lanes with Poppy, but look to counterpicking entire teams. Let's say you're up against a team with like Kiana's and stuff like that with lots of dashes, then you can pull out the Poppy and get a ton of work done off of just being able to like control fights with your W and your ultimate to just get people out if they are a bit of a menace. So yeah, she's not that strong in if you just mainly play her all the time because like she does get counterpicked quite hard, and some of the champions that just kind of like, some champions can just wait out her W because she can't actually kill them during the W. So like if they get in front of her or whatever, they can just wait the W out and then dash to either get away from her or follow up with their rest of the combo to kill the Poppy. And if she's playing as a champion with no dash, then she's just screwed, I guess. So yeah. But yeah, there's Poppy. Pantheon. I'd say Pantheon is a pretty strong champion, right? I'm a big fan of Pantheon. Thing is, like, he's not been doing that well lately, so I'll put him in B tier, right? But he can still be played at a very high level, right? You just need to be good enough at him to, like, not int. Because when Pantheon starts dying, he's just absolutely worthless. So as long as you can at least stay even in lane and then use your ultimate to like jump into the enemy's jungle to try to kill him or these kinds of crazy plays, then you can get a lot of work done as Pantheon. He's quite underrated in my opinion. Quinn, she's kind of the same-ish as Akshan. She can roam a lot. Her only weakness is that she actually has to wait until her level 6 to be able to do all the roamy stuff, but this is still great for her, right? She's a good range top laner. And she's capable of basically taking control of the game at level 6 by just roaming to the right situations. She's especially great when you play her as an assassin of just one-shotting people and then getting out of the situation with your Valor. But, like, she doesn't have that high of a range. So, against teams that are super mobile, where Quinn's, like, movement speed, like, mobility is not going to be that helpful, then she kind of runs into the trouble of just being, like, hey, do I suicide for this kill? Because the second I step in there, I'm going to die like this, you know? Renekton is a pretty underrated champ. Also, the only thing holding him back is one, like, he's kind of difficult to play properly, right? And also, I guess they did buff him slightly when they gave him AD scale on his ultimate, but that's not really that useful. He just kind of pales in comparison to some of the higher tier champions, because the reason they can't really do that much work with Renekton is because of his W. His W is point and click guaranteed CC, right? It's guaranteed. And because that works so well with junglers, they can't actually buff Renekton too much, right? Now, Renekton is kind of a generalist champion in that he has a great gank setup. He's kind of tough to gank and kill because of his multiple dashes. He has lane sustain. His Q heals him off of minions, which gives him ability to do a lot of things that some champions cannot do, right? He doesn't need lifesteal. He doesn't need like a vamp scepter to start, like freezing, right? When you freeze, if you drag the lane as a normal champion, then you're just going to lose so much HP that's not even going to matter. But if you do it as Renekton, you can just heal from it using your Q, right? And just not negate some of the HP that you lost by dragging a massive frozen wave. So it's like, Renekton is a very, very nice generalist champion that you can make work into a lot of different situations, and he's also very powerful in organized play, right? It's just, because of these kinds of positives, he's not really allowed to be that high tier. Rengar. I'd say Rengar is B tier. He's insanely difficult to play, right? Lots of little tricks and stuff you gotta learn to actually play this champion properly, but Rengar is kind of like your Pantheon, where if you can get through lane and get to a point where you're just controlling the map using your ultimate, you can get a lot of work done as Rengar, right? He's insanely powerful in these kinds of jungle, teamfight, river kind of skirmishes where like he can make use of his passive, just jumping from bush to bush to bush, because his bushes basically give him infinite mobility, right? As long as he doesn't auto attack up, I suppose. So like, the potential of what you can do with Rengar is insanely high. It's just, like, he does get counterpicked quite hard by some of the champions in the game that are quite popular. One of the examples is Darius, right? Darius just absolutely destroys Rengar. But yeah, there are some champions that absolutely counterpick Rengar and make the game unplayable for him. And they happen to be quite popular. So, yeah. He's still quite a strong champion, though, that you can play. If you're a jungler Rengar player and you want to play top lane, you can just play Rengar top. It is quite a difference in playstyle, but having the mechanics of just how to jump and stuff mastered is going to be quite helpful. Riven is always going to be one of the most powerful solo queue champions in the game. The durability changes kind of hit her down initially, but then she just bounced back up. And yeah, I don't think I need to explain anything. Riven is arguably the best top laner in the game right now and forever, not just because she's literally number one all the time, but because she's always going to be S tier, no matter what. And she's going to be at her weakest, just powerful. Okay, so yeah. Rise. Get out of here. Oh, I forgot about Rumble. Let's go Rumble. Rumble, I'd say I put him in B tier. He's got a lot of tools to just, like, play the lane out. He can play it safe. He can one-shot people using his full combo. When he is, like, in his danger zone, like, the second part of his, like, heat bar, I suppose, he can actually do a one-shot combo with his ult, his flamethrower and everything, where he just kills you in one go, right? But Rumble just does take a lot of work to really get down in that way. Not to mention how, like his 1v1, once he hits level 6, kind of sucks, because his ultimate, although it is really powerful, some champions just don't have to stay inside of it. Okay? There are some champions you can just easily jump out of it, so you just get like 1 to 2 ticks off on them. I mean, obviously they will tick, like the dot is going to keep damaging them, but they're just going to stay in the ultimate zone for a few like ticks, basically, right? And then they're going to jump out and get on top of Rumble and just kill him, right? So level 6, his all-in power goes down very like hard, so you got to get some work done before level 6. But the good part about Rumble is that if he does survive lane, and God forbid he has a lead, he gets so much work done, because Rumble has a lot of damage. He can just start one-shotting people left and right in teamfights. His ultimate is absolutely crazy. All the team fights in the jungle, in the river, around objectives, he can just absolutely dominate them with his ultimate. Just make sure that the enemy team is split and they can't actually fight them properly. So yeah, he's a very good zone area controlling champion with his ultimate, giving him air. Rise sucks. Olaf, I'd say Olaf is pretty powerful. One of the things that makes him really powerful is the fact that he's super easy to play. Olaf absolutely takes 0 difficulty to play. So if you pick him into a champion where they have a lot of CC, then Olaf is just perfect, because you can just brain dead run at them and kill them through all that. The main issue with Olaf, and they actually nerfed this, is that they nerfed his ability to just stay in lane without actively fighting people. Now with Olaf, he kind of has a difficulty in like getting to his level 6 in some matchups, because some matchups kind of can keep him at arm's distance with attacks with CC and then dashing back. So if he's up against a champion like that, he can't really interact with a lane, because all he can do is throw a hatchet, right? But if he walks in more CC and they jump out, so he just takes damage for no reason, right? And also when he's higher health, his W shield is not that high, so you can't really get that much off of it. So, like, his short trades suck. His range kind of sucks. Like, he can't really interact with the lane against some champions. What they did, they nerfed his HP regen. They buffed, I think, either the attack speed of his passive or the lifesteal, I'm not too sure. I think they buffed the attack speed. But they also nerfed, they increased the mana cost of his hatchet, his Q, right? So Olaf has gotten slightly weaker in the matchups that he sucks against. But the thing is, right, if you do survive until level 6, game on. That's when he starts going crazy. So Olaf is definitely a solid champion to just have in your back pocket. Just know the basics so that you can actually counterpick some champions, because he's really, really strong in some situations. Set. B tier, honestly. Set has been at his weakest point he has ever been, right? Like, the champions that beat him are kind of quite strong. The things that he's good at are just not that valuable. And not to mention, with champions like Zeri and stuff around, he just gets absolutely outclassed, where it's like, he has his W, and by the time he's finished with it, his whole team is just dead. So it's like, you know, Set, if he gets super fed, then he can kind of run around the map and be like a B-Tech Garen, I guess. But like, it's just not that useful, man. So it's like, these aren't his heydays. Obviously, he's still great in top lane brawls. He's still amazing in early game skirmishes where everything's slow and he can really take his time to bash people's brains in. But like, you know, as the game goes on, he becomes less and less and less and less useful. So yeah, Set really needs some love by Riot Games. Shen, I don't really need to explain anything. He can just roam around the map with his ultimate and get a lot of work done helping everybody. Shen is never going to be a weak champion as long as the game is like this, which is just, you know, Riot's not going to do anything to revert the game or whatever, so Shen will always be one of the most powerful champions in the game to just pick up and play. And Shen is a great champion to just learn the game off of, because Shen teaches top laners macro, and top laner macro, especially in lower ranks, is notorious for being super weak. So like, if you are learning the game, you should most definitely pick up Shen, because he teaches you an important aspect of the game that other champions don't teach that well. Singed. Oh my god. Singed, I'd say, is a B tier, I guess. Like, if you can play Singed, if you can proxy, if you can run through people, Singed is a monster. Especially if you abuse the whole Predator to run on the map like a grass-eating animal, just flipping people and getting kills, then Singed is absolutely like a hilarious nightmare to play against. But like, that's just it, man. Like, you really gotta know how to play this champion to really do well with him. I'm gonna increase his difficulty actually to orange, because it's just so one tricky and different. You're not even playing the same game as everybody, you're doing your own thing. And Singed also gets countered by a lot of champions who just absolutely destroy him. So yeah, I'd say I'll put it back to medium difficulty. I just looked at some of the more difficult champions. I'm like, nah, Singed is not that hard. But yeah, he does have his difficulty to play. You're just doing a different thing than everybody else. Sion got absolutely destroyed by the nerfs. They nerfed Hullbreaker. They nerfed him doing damage to turrets. So he's basically just a normal tank that kind of does damage, which, you know, that's the design of it. But it's just, it's just not the thing that's overpowered right now, I suppose. Sion also gets absolutely eaten up by a lot of the champions, like Fiora and stuff. They just destroy him, get fed, and they 1v9 the game. So yeah, Sion is having some difficulties nowadays. Sylas sucks. He's just here to counter Malphite and a few specific champions. If he can do a lot of work done with his ultimate stealing, then yeah, sure, he's good. But Sylas just cannot put up a good fight against some of the meat men up here in top lane. Swain sucks. He has no way to peel himself. I guess if he gets phase rush, he can just run away, but his clothing is way too inconsistent to use as just like peel for himself. Tahm Kench. I'll put Tahm Kench in the B tier. They did buff him back up to being in a strong position, but Tahm Kench is kind of hard to play because you really gotta know the mechanics of every single champion, and you gotta know the mechanics of Tahm Kench, and basically use the mechanics of Tahm Kench to just cheese kills over and over again. And once you've cheesed like 1 to 2 kills, you get to a point where you're basically unkillable, right? Tahm Kench is very much like a trick champion, right? You just gotta, haha, you didn't know I could hold you in my mouth for 2.5 seconds, so that's this ability gone, right? It's like these kinds of tricks just make it so that like the enemy did not know you could do that. That's the kind of thing you want to do, right? Because if somebody knows what Tahm Kench is capable of, and they play a champion that can put up a good fight, then you are boned. Because like Tahm Kench, although he is like very low counterplay, if somebody can use their minions properly and just kite you properly and save their CC for when you're going down under, then they're able to just absolutely milk you for like gold and stuff, right? Tahm Kench is also jungler food because again, his thing where he goes underwater is so slow that to get away from a gank, Tom has to make sure that the person who's nearest to him, who can CC him, is stunned by his Q tongue lash, right? But if you're fighting against the person who knows this, they're gonna walk back, get under some, get behind some minion, and you're not gonna get them stunned, and they're just gonna get on top of you, stun you. The jungle comes in, and you are dead, right? Tom is also not a fan of just getting absolutely shredded by Kog'Maws and stuff that are like really strong right now. So, yeah. But also, he's quite a strong champion, really. Once he does get that kill, he is nigh invulnerable. Like, have you ever fought a Tahm Kench who's fed? It's like, you are never going to kill him, ever. Like, he just tanks up so hard that you need Serpent's Fang, and you need somebody who does, like, percentage health damage at the same time to actually put him down. And Serpent's Fang buyers are, like, squishy assassins, which is, by the sheer virtue of being near him, will just get absolutely eaten up like a little snack. Teemo. I'll put Teemo in B tier. The thing with Teemo is that he's got to survive until level 6. Until level 6, he is jungler food, right? So you got to pick him into a decent match where he can survive, and you got to be very careful to just back off when the jungler's around. Once you get level 6, you can put your shrooms down around your lane to really set up a perimeter of vision and damage so that if somebody does walk up, you can just kill them, or you can just, like, see them and walk back. He's got a lot of move speed, but, like, there's a lot of ifs and buts and stuff like that. And then a lot of people don't actually use Teemo's shrooms properly, right? So you get like 2-3 Teemo one-tricks in the world who actually know how to play this champion, so I can't put him that high up, but, he's still playable, right? He's still playable. It's just, if he's playing against a champion who can really just exploit his weak early, then he is destroyed. Trinda's been slowly crawling back up ever since they buffed him back. He's just slowly getting higher and higher and higher in tier lists, so Tryndamere is back to being a really nice, solid, strong champion, in my opinion. Trundle's getting weaker and weaker, because the champions that destroy Trundle are really strong right now, right? He had his time in the sun. He had his time where he was one of the best 1v1ers in the game, but as... like, in these last few patches, like your Tryndameres and stuff, these champions who can actually kill Trundle and just make his life a nightmare, are becoming more and more prevalent and more in Trundle's face, which really disallows Trundle from basically being as strong as he used to be. Urgot is a really nice, really consistent champion. His early isn't that strong, but he's basically a team fighting tank that kills people. Okay, I think that's the best way to describe him. He's a tank that kills people. Now, I do know that Ornn does that too, right? Ornn is also a tank that kills people. Like, Urgot is like a consistent source of damage, but he also has nice peel for his team, and he kind of functions as like a really solid frontliner, right? So I'd say that Urgot is like in B tier because, he's not as consistent as some of the higher tier champions. He's not as mobile. He doesn't, like, scale as hard. He gets eaten up in side lanes a lot of the time. So yeah, he's got a bunch of weaknesses, but I don't know. He's quite a solid champion if you can make him work. If like the situations where he's like weak until, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. Is it just brain dead going for kills, I suppose. Vayne, oof. Vayne is absolutely loving these patches, right? She went from being just a counter pick to being a counter pick that just counters even harder. So a perfectly played Vayne can just absolutely demolish not just lanes, but also teams, right? If you pick Vayne into a team where you can get a lot of work done, and you pick her into like a matchup where you can get a lot of work done, you can basically single-handedly win the game with just Vayne. Okay, it's just single-handedly. No help required. Like, build 2-3 damage out and just go straight tank or whatever, and it's like, you're gonna get so much work done that it is absolutely crazy. It's like, just insane. So, if you can counterpick entire teams, then Vayne can solo win games. But then we're just getting into the issues of, hey, she's a low range champion, so she's jungler food, etc. She's got to be against like good matchups, etc., etc., etc. So she's basically a really, really powerful counter pick, right? Really strong counter pick, so strong that I put her in B tier. Vladimir, lane holder, he just exists in lane. He doesn't do anything early game. He scales into a team fighting monster, sure, but that's not really enough to be a strong top laner. Volibear sucks. He just gets destroyed. He's way too slow. Honestly, I think he's a better jungler than a top laner nowadays, so yeah, he's just basically a kind of picking against champions who can actually get destroyed by him in that he gets both his Q and his E on them, and he can stay in their face long enough to get his Ws off and just kill them, but that's not a very long list of champions. Warwick is not a good champion. If we're talking like low elo, I guess he's kind of C, B tier, but like Volibear just sucks, man. All he does is get kills in lane. That is it. All he does is get kills in lane. So if you're up against a champion who also needs kills in lane to survive and to do well, like you're up against a Kled, for example. Kled needs kills. Then you can pick Warwick, and because Kled is useless, you can basically just hey, I've neutralized this one champion, and I'm at least more useful than him. You can kind of ensure that your team has a higher percentage chance of winning off of you doing that. So I guess if you kind of pick him into these kinds of champions, he is great. But Warwick doesn't actually bring that much utility or use into his team. He doesn't do that much damage. His CC is not that great because, again, his ultimate, although it's suppression, which is one of the best CCs in the game that you can think of, it can be very easily cancelled. Oftentimes, it's not just that one enemy champion has CC, it's that almost all of them have CC. So if you're ulting someone in a team fight, you're only going to get the suppression off for a single second before somebody just peels you off of them with some CC, right? Not to mention how, he's not even that tanky, right? So he doesn't give his team damage, not CC utility, doesn't heal anyone, doesn't really tank that much damage, is more of a roamy, skirmishy kind of champion than a team fight champion. So, I guess if you just want to run on the map, kind of start cheese killing people, but still go up top to maybe have a chance to keep cheese killing the top laner because you've already killed him because you kind of picked him, then I guess he's a great choice, right? But that's just so niche that I can't put him any higher on this tier list. Wukong is really powerful, super, super easy to play, scales up insanely well, is a team fighting nightmare, just ults, knocks up everybody and is able to use Divine Center to just bonk, kill them in 2-3 auto attacks. Really, really strong champion. But his main, positive is that he's super easy to play, right? He doesn't take any skill to play. Now, you can't tell me, Wukong has a lot of skill you gotta use your clone smartly to dodge abilities and stuff. It's no, you don't have to do any of that. You just gotta use your clone as a gap closer or to cross walls or whatever, right? Just use it as a dash, basically. You can just be completely oblivious to your clone existing and just still do well as Wukong. He's not difficult to play at all. Yasuo sucks top lane. He just gets destroyed by almost everybody. If you can pick him into a champion that he does really well into, that he specifically counters with his mobility, then you can get a lot of work done. But with Yasuo, I've said this many times in the past and I'll say it again. As Yasuo, you have to outplay the enemy to survive. You don't have to outplay the enemy to get ahead. You have to outplay the enemy to survive, to stay even. Because in almost every single matchup, you start off behind as Yasuo. And unless you're fighting a complete moron who'll fight you level 1 and 2 where you're the strongest, then, the game's going to start getting really hard for you to play. If you're fighting someone with a brain. Yone is almost always a really strong champion. I'll put him in A tier because he's not been doing too well last patch, but I'm sure he'll just bounce back to being A+ tier. But yeah, let's just put him here for now. Yone is Yone. He's basically Yasuo, but just better at everything a top laner needs to be better at. His two item power spike is among the most powerful in the entire game. It's insane. He can just go from being a 110 loser to being a 10-0 Giga Chad to just by getting those items. It's just that much of a jump in power, right? He's insanely useful in team fights. His ultimate is just amazing, and Yone is one of those champions that can just 1v9 in game by himself. Yorick is B tier. I don't want to go too much into Yorick, but basically speaking, to do well as Yorick, you have to counterpick someone, right? If you don't win lane as Yorick, then side laning is not going to be a possibility because, one, right, you have to win 1v1 to actually be able to side lane as Yorick, and two, if you're not fed, then it's very easy for the enemy team to just kill you with, like, they send 2 people to you, kill you super easily, and then they go and just take the objective or whatever, right? So it's like, I guess if you're picking your split pushes at the right time, you can avoid this. Hey, 2 people are here, 3 people are at the objective, it's 3 versus 4, we can win it. So I guess if you split push intelligently, you can circumvent some of that. Like, hey, I die, but we get the objective, right? But it's just like, doing all the split pushy stuff is significantly more difficult to near impossible when you're behind. You have to be ahead or at least even out of lane as Yorick. So, like, there are lots of circumstances that could just destroy him, right? And a lot of champions, like, if he's up against a team that can, like, roam and cross walls really easily, then it's going to be basically no effort for the enemy team to just pick him up, kill him, and then just move on, right? So, yeah, that is pretty much it for this episode. Sorry for having to wipe my forehead over and over again, but this heat wave is melting me. I'm not made for this, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the video. Here's the full tier list with everything. Hope it was useful. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.